got to take all of the little wins along the way, and they really mean so much. Just those little confidence boosters that kind of you're like, oh, like I can do this, you know. I remember wanting wanting a lecturer to come in and tell me you should keep going, wanting someone else just to tell me, just yes, you're good enough, go and do it. But ultimately, you have to, get to that point yourself.
Today, I'm joined by Emily Hartley-Skudder, who is known for her paintings, ensemblages, and site-specific installations into the artificial, ordinary, and faux domestique. Think life-size doll houses, carpeted bathrooms, and discoloured fake fruit. She's got a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Island School of Fine Arts and has exhibited her work throughout the motu and internationally, as well as winning the Molly Morpeth Kennedy Major Award this year. Woo! She now joins us on The Big Idea. Emily, when you hear something like that read out, how does it make you feel?
I don't know. I guess it feels good. Yeah, it feels good. In some ways, I guess we're quite used to. I remember at art school, kind of trying to write a bio and trying to make you sound fancy. You know, makes you sound more professional than you maybe are. But yeah.
So let's talk about your journey, because we're here now, but every story's got a start, middle, and end. Let's rewind the tape back to when you first started your creative journey. Was there a moment you remember where you realized this is something I'm interested in, or I have a passion for and skill for as well?
I guess I was always quite creative as a kid, but just kind of the usual drawings for mum and dad and all that, and for friends. And I think during school I ended up just really enjoying it and kind of getting chosen to be in art extension classes and stuff like that. So it's kind of always been there. And then I realized through high school that I ended up really, really focusing on my folios, the painting and photography folios, and everything, especially in seventh form, everything else kind of dropped away a little bit. So I kind of realized then that that's kind of what I wanted to do. I didn't really know that it was possible to be an artist. So I think I wanted to go to art school, but I was always at the back of my mind thinking, how can I have fun at art school, but then also use those skills to do some sort of creative job? But I never kind of took a while to accept that being an artist could be possible, and that is what I really wanted to do. Yeah.
What do you say to your friends or strangers that meet you in a cafe and ask you what you do for a living? Because I guess it could be as long or short as you want it. But do you have a little sales pitch, or do you tell them I'm an artist, or what do you say to them?
Yeah, I say I'm an artist. It's quite hard if they say, describe, what do you make, kind of thing, because it sounds quite silly when I start describing it. I guess I say that I'm a painter, because I think most people, if they're not in the creative world, they kind of assume, artist, maybe a painter or a sculptor, but sometimes it's easier even to show them. Like I kind of just say I'm a painter, but also work with a lot of found objects and then make larger installations. But it's quite hard to paint a picture in some ways. So, excuse the pun, but yeah. So, I guess I also say that I kind of cobble together other part-time jobs to kind of make things work as well. Yeah.
How has that journey been for you about you're an artist, that's what you're passionate about, and then also supplementing that with other things as well? Like, how has that journey been from when you're in art school and you're doing the photography and visual arts, and then to realizing I want to try and make a career out of this thing? This could potentially work.
Yeah, it was hard. I think through art school I was really battling with the idea, like, was this actually what I wanted to do, or more so, was it possible to be an artist? And I remember an artist that had finished art school a few years earlier and coming back, and she introduced herself as an artist, and we were like, whoa, like, when are you allowed to say that you're an artist? Or I don't know, it was kind of like would I ever be able to claim that? But
was there a moment that because someone said to you, come and said, I'm an artist, but when did you feel you were an artist at some stage? Do you remember that moment, or has it just been building up?
I think I remember a moment when in my fourth year, I had arranged to do a small exhibition at on site at the art school, so fairly low pressure. But it was still, I'd kind of made it my personal goal. Like, it wasn't actually part of the curriculum at the time, but I was like, okay, in my fourth year, I'm going to push myself to actually like do a semi kind of proper exhibition. But I remember sitting there and I was like so nervous about it because it was such a step somehow to put it kind of in away from the studio and in a exhibition context. And I was like, well, maybe it's okay. Maybe I just don't need to. Maybe, I've done 4 years, but it's okay if I don't be an artist. And I don't know, I was kind of grappling with the fear of it, but also forced myself to kind of make that step. And it's quite funny, I still think about that moment, even though it was on site, kind of small room exhibition space. But for some reason, that was kind of a point where it was a bit of a hurdle that first time I kind of put my paintings up by themselves on the white walls and kind of like printed out little invites and gave people. And it was really like the first time you really, really put yourself out there, which was quite nerve-wracking. And then I think from there, I guess once I'd kind of done that, I was like, yeah, and then I got some good feedback, and I don't know, all of the little things along the way, especially when you're just starting out or finishing up art school, you've got to take all of the little wins along the way, and they really mean so much. Just those little confidence boosters that kind of, you're like, oh, like I can do this, I remember wanting a lecturer to come in and tell me you should keep going, or like, like if it's worth it. But ultimately, obviously, that's what you have to decide for yourself. So, but I remember, yeah, wanting someone else just to tell me, just, yes, you're good enough, go and do it. But ultimately, you have to, yeah, get to that point yourself. Yeah.
And how did you get to that point yourself if you don't have someone who's in your ear saying, you're good enough, you're doing great, Emily?
Yeah.
How did you find it within yourself to be that person, to self-affirmation, to do it?
I guess I've always been quite ambitious, whether that kind of matches up with reality or not. There's just something that I guess I hold myself to quite a high standard, and I just really wanted to be, just to make it work and be, I don't know, I guess I like challenging myself, but I also, I was just like, no, I don't know, there was, I often talk about how there's this kind of combination, like conflicting thoughts of being an artist. There's actually like kind of like a Venn diagram online, and I think one of them's like complete narcissism, and the other one's like total self-doubt, and it's kind of like where those overlap. So yeah, and I was like, oh, it's so true, because to get to the point where you're like, I'm doing this thing and look at it and it's worthy of like showing people, you have to have some sort of crazy ambition or confidence, or some sort of drive, just to, it's kind of hard to describe. But then there's also, you're always battling this like self-doubt at the same time, and just like, what am I doing? What's the point? Like, yeah, so it's quite hard to describe, but there's always this tension, I think. Yeah, and no matter how long you've been doing it, I think. So yeah.
And how do you deal with that? It's like you're bouncing in between those two circles, right? And you're trying to find a happy space in the middle, because it's a thing all artists go through, right? Because you got to make yourself vulnerable to put your work out there. And you got to have an element of confidence and being, yep, it's good enough. But at the same time, you're thinking, oh, what are people going to think? How do you get the confidence to get over that and be able, for other artists who are in that stage, to be able just to take the plunge?
Well, it is really hard. You just, I just push yourself. I guess you just have to just get, even just like getting past that first time maybe might kind of help. And even though it does get slightly easier, but you're still always pretty nervous about what you're doing, and it still doesn't get completely easy, what would it be? Just, I guess I guess depending, it could be even showing, if we're talking about exhibiting work, showing with friends or other artists. To sometimes that might be like a step into it, like working on or collaborating with someone, or reaching out to people. I guess often it's the people who you go through art school with, but perhaps that I was in a couple of group shows during art school as well that was a lot less nerve-wracking, because if it's like in a big group, and it's kind of just to kind of ease into it a little bit when we're actually talking about showing work. But yeah, it is tricky. I think some artists just have to you just have that drive there, that that you wouldn't need to keep making, and for some people you don't actually need to exhibit it, and that's amazing. If that's, you just make it for yourself. But I personally really like having a deadline or a project that I'm working on. Otherwise, I feel like I can be pulled in too many directions and have too many different ideas, and I'm not sure what one to start on or what one to focus, and end up kind of starting a few things but never completing them. So personally, I really love having a project or deadline. But that's also another thing that's hard, because you kind of also have to make that happen yourself often as an artist, in terms of applying for things, approaching galleries to have shows, or I think that is almost one of the hardest things too, is actually finding that environment to actually show others your work too, because it's not always a given. And there is quite a bit of luck involved too, whether someone reaches out and wants to show your work, but it's not always the case. So, yeah.
After that initial fearful moment of exhibiting that work and then exhibiting it and seeing the little tidbits of affirmations and positivity coming through, was it always like that for the rest of your career up until now? Were there other moments where that fear crept in, or an obstacle came along the way which you had to overcome? Was there moments of that along your journey so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think I try to apply for quite a few things, putting in proposals for exhibitions or residencies, and often I've only had a couple of residencies, but I'm no expert in knowing how you're actually meant to write them as well. So that's really hard, because there's so many factors in terms of who's applying at the time, who the judges are like, or who the panelists are. So a lot of times it really isn't necessarily up to you, but I guess it's, in some ways, when I apply for exhibitions, it's part of taking it into my own hands in some ways, because at least you're trying your best to kind of apply for things in some ways. But you also have to have quite a thick skin, because you're going to get a lot of rejections as well. And then even at times when, and they can also often come all at once as well. So it's like that can be quite hard. And then sometimes a lot of good things come at once too. So it can be quite a roller coaster, and I really wish it didn't. But I guess, I wish I didn't kind of feel things so deeply as well. But I think a lot of artists are pretty sensitive as well. So quite sensitive people. So it's hard not to, I guess, take things personally. But I guess the main thing is just to keep going. And if you can't find a place to show your work, making it happen yourself in some way. So it's really great if you're able to do kind of put on a show yourself somehow. I remember a time where I was calling landlords around the city, trying about empty buildings and trying to organize a pop-up show. But that can also be hard, convincing landlords to give you a space for a week or something, because so it definitely takes a lot of putting yourself out there. But I think you almost need to do it yourself first, because in terms of curators and dealers and stuff, I think they really like to see it. They need to kind of see it in front of them. They need to see that you're kind of already doing it yourself in some ways, which is hard.
How do you personally deal with the rejection, because you're sending in all these applications and you're putting yourself out there and you're putting so much mahi, so much effort into your work, and then you mentioned before, like a letter will come in and say no, a rejection here, and it might all come at once, but you can't sit in your room and cry, right? Or maybe you do for a little bit and get back. But what do you? Which is all good, nothing against that. But what do you do personally to help you get back up?
I think if you can use it as, it's really hard, but if you can use it as motivation to keep going, or I guess the most rewarding thing I find is when I'm actually in the studio in the middle of making work, of painting, or in the middle of a project, and I guess trying to remember that that's why you do it. Like, yes, you do also want to do it to get it out there and exhibit, but I think ultimately you have to remember that it is you, like, you're doing it because it's giving something back to you. So yeah, I don't know, it is quite hard, but I guess like it can also be hard when you're getting advice from all sorts of from all around, or people saying, oh, maybe if you make your work, or like in terms of critique as well, and sometimes that can be quite confusing because you're getting like very differing advice, and I guess it's just coming back to okay, but what the only consistent thing is kind of yourself and your own kind of vision, I guess.
And speaking about your vision and doing it for yourself, because I love how you put that, but everyone's got a why, right, at their core of why they do the things, and that's what drives them. Because often when you look outside and it's raining, you don't want to go outside. If your why is strong enough, it will get you up. It will take you places where you didn't want to go. But for you in your work and in the creative space, is there something that drives you even when you get those rejection letters or when things aren't going right? Like, is there a deep desire within you that guides you and pushes you along?
Yeah, definitely. There's something, just definitely kind of that ambition or drive there, but it's hard to describe kind of where it comes from. But it can really, even thoughts creep into my head now. I'm like, oh man, it would kind of be so much easier if I just like stopped making work and stopped being an artist. Like, I don't know, sometimes it's just like, if you've had a period of, I've just been recently like moving house, moved back to Porneke from Ōtepoti, where I had a fellowship down there, and I'm actually, this is a full disclosure, this isn't actually my photographs behind me. I'm staying with an artist friend, so I just realized this is recorded. So and you know, so this is Caroline McCrory's work. I'm just staying at her house, and we set up where the internet was good, so that's also not great because it's not my work behind me, but but so I was saying, I'm in a point where I'm like pretty uprooted at the moment and trying to find a permanent place to live, and I haven't, it's been a couple of weeks since I've been doing a lot of, I guess, work on my computer and stuff and admin stuff, but I haven't been kind of making in the studio, and you kind of start feeling a bit lost, and the longer you're kind of not making, almost the harder it is. And I think it's this thing that you're like, oh, am I still an artist if you've had a bit of a break, or but it is hard because you're always kind of looking back at other work and being like, could I do that again? Or it's almost like you're only as good as your last, or for me, like my last painting, or so if you leave it too long, there is this anxiety there, and maybe that's why I kind of keep going back, because you never quite achieve what you want to achieve. It's hard to describe, but it's this thing, kind of, I don't know, I guess a bit like an addiction in some ways, because it's like once you've made a thing and then you're like, you feel satisfied with, you're like, okay, that I'm happy, or not, but you're like, I feel happy with this thing, but then as soon as a bit of time passes, you're like, could I ever do that again? Like, oh, I better make the next thing to like, I don't know, psychologically, it's like hard to describe. But
so do you feel some pressure sometimes because you create artwork, right? And there's appreciation, there's acceptance, like, this is good, this is great. And you're thinking, yeah, it's a reminder, I am bloody good at what I do. And then you think, you take a bit of a break, and then that fear, is it that you're like, man, do I still know how to ride the bike? Do I still know how to drive the car?
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's it. It's like there's that fear there as well, not which actually keeps you going back as well. Because also I think once you've been doing it for a while, you realize that you don't really have many other skills necessarily, or like you kind of almost in too deep that you're like, well, if I'm not an artist, like what can I do? You know? So I mean, not that that's always the best reason, but it is like it does really become part of who you are and your identity. And I think because you're kind of always like, I'm always kind of thinking about my practice, and kind of always, I guess you can't, well, I find it quite hard to switch off as well. So it kind of just becomes part of your everyday life. And I'm often, even just in terms of emailing people and admin, I'm often on my phone doing that at night. And, it kind of just all blends together in terms of what's work and what's not, which is great because I guess I love it. I'm driven to do it, but then it is also hard to rest and not get burnt out at the same time as well. Yeah.
I get a sense from you that you are deeply passionate and just all consumed by your art. Would that be a fair description? Is that how you see your work? Like, you just love it, breathe it, the ambition is there? Is there a drive to create and stay in the game of art, even though sometimes you've even mentioned, I don't know if I want to stay in here, but you're like, nah, I love it.
Yeah, I think I have a real, I guess I get really, really focused on things, and especially when I'm super focused on a project and the deadline's coming up, it is kind of a bit all consuming. And my partner, who's also an artist, Hamish Coleman, he's like, we can both, it's an interesting relationship, both being artists as well, because we help each other a lot. He helps me a lot, but he's just like, oh man, you're like just only talking about your exhibition at the moment, or you're only talking about your work. But sometimes to be completely in it, especially during those really crunch times, it does kind of become all consuming. So but I guess I think that is the case for a lot of artists.
How do you manage it? Do you have a system? Like, how do you manage? Because I imagine it's like everyone's like, I got chaos, I got a messy desk, which is all good, but they've got a system, right? They at least they know what's going on. So how do you manage the chaosness of all of that and everything being all over the show? Because you know what you're doing. Do you have a system in place, or? Yeah,
that's funny because my studio is pretty chaotic. It's funny because I, in terms of my work, like my paintings are very, very controlled, very detailed. I'm quite a perfectionist in terms of like, to the very finest detail, and even when it's larger scale, when I'm making installations as well, which can be quite tiring. But my studio is chaos, and there's just stuff everywhere. You can't find the floor, and it does get pretty, I guess it gets messier and messier as it leads up to a deadline too. But I guess there's kind of a method to the madness, and kind of, I guess that's the studio is the one place that I'm allowed to be messy, and it's my space, and I can be chaotic if, I don't need to tidy up, but sometimes it is helpful. But I guess what I often end up doing in terms of working towards a show, or I think a lot of artists, but I'm not a particularly like balanced person as well, which means I can put everything in when I'm working towards a show and kind of give everything, but then ultimately other things suffer as well. Like you might not like sleep properly or eat properly, or like, there's like just general self-care things that I need to watch out for, but I guess you do get a bit of adrenaline, or you kind of get when you're really working towards something, there is that really great feeling that but it's also not sustainable. So often you have like a really big crash after like a big project, after and get kind of post-show blues. I don't know if and that can be really hard because it's like really high, like highs and lows, and you just work towards something, and then especially if there's like an opening and stuff, and then it's kind of like a bit like your birthday, or I don't know, something, and everyone's there. But I guess but it's great because you've worked towards something, and it's not the most healthy, but in some ways I definitely got into the habit of thinking like I need to push myself really hard because then I like deserve it more or something, which is not necessarily a healthy way to work. But I think I kind of got into that habit a little bit, even at high school, like staying up all night trying to finish things, and it's not a good thing. But I do find myself throwing everything in and like using every last drop of energy, and then unfortunately there is
it's not just physical energy, it's emotional energy as well, you're
definitely
pouring everything into it, and it just drains you. And it's kind of like when you have that birthday party and all the kids are there, all the parents are there, it's all exciting, and then once they all leave it's dead quiet, and and so when you experience that yourself, how do you cope with it now? Have you sort of realized before it's like, okay, maybe I just need to manage my energy a bit more, or are you just riding that roller coaster until the wheels fall off?
Yeah, I think at times I'm now more aware of it, and I'm like I need to, like, the harder I push, the harder you kind of crash, and it can be really awful because you just feel suddenly you don't feel like it wasn't worth anything, and you don't even like what you did, or I don't know, you can kind of get into this. Hopefully it passes, but it can be, I don't know, it can be quite hard. But yeah, there's definitely times where I just kind of like you said, ride that roller coaster until everything falls off. But I think trying to remember that actually I am the most productive in the long term if I'm pacing myself and getting enough sleep and all of that. Ultimately, that you can work like that for longer, and it's not great to go all out, and then unfortunately often you might have periods, like quite a long period of like not really being able to make much because you're just so burnt out, and that's never good. But it's much easier said than done to actually be able to find that balance. And sometimes the way that I work, if there's a little bit more time, I'm like, oh, what else can I add to it? Like, I'm always wanting to, I don't know, make things harder for myself.
You want to squeeze that lemon so there's no more juice until you're getting to the pit. That's the feeling I get. But
again, not always like the best strategy, but that's kind of how the pattern has played out in terms of my practice so far. Because
have you become more self-aware of it as you've grown older? Because when you're younger, you just got more energy. Like, you can do the 3 nights without sleeping and you kind of still turn up and you're kind of all good. And then as you get older, it hits you a bit harder. Have you found yourself over time becoming more self-aware as an artist of the toll it takes on you, and then being more mindful of sort of finding ways to deal with that, and just being, okay, I just need to take it easy here, or do these tips and tricks here just to help me make sure that I'm still on that roller coaster at the end of the long ride, rather than it gets to the end and you're not on it.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm a lot more aware of it now, and definitely kind of have that voice in my head just being like, you need to look after yourself, because ultimately it won't. Just in terms of the long haul. But sometimes, I guess I'm not the best at that, listening to others and listening to yourself to do that. But I think ultimately, that in terms of the long haul and kind of trying to find some consistency is always a bit of a struggle, I think, for quite a few artists. I think also what we haven't chatted about is so many artists are also working another job, and that can also be hard in terms of, well, just the time that it takes, but also the energy it takes. I often get really frustrated if you use up all of your energy in kind of your side job, And then on your days that should be your studio days, you need to rest because, yeah, and it's hard to not be kind of a bit resentful of that, especially because obviously you need to work, you need money. So that can also
It's
be a
such a
really
great
hard.
point.
Yeah, so I've just finished the Francis Hodgkins Fellowship, which was a full year of actually being paid to be an artist. So it was the first time where I didn't have to worry about cobbling together different jobs, and that was amazing. But I'm definitely having a like back to reality moment now. We've moved back to Wellington. I'm trying to get some routine and
Yeah.
realizing I need to get
Yeah.
get jobs and work out what I'm kind of doing, because at the time it was amazing to be able to work on just achieve so much more and work on multiple projects at once, because I kind of had that space to do that. But it's also a bit depressing that that's probably the only time that I'll ever have that. So I think that's also kind of sad. But yeah.
Because that is the life of many, right? A bartender, I was speaking to someone the other day, and they worked as a bartender. You put in so much time and energy there, and you're trying to do your art, your creative outlet on the side. But to be able to commit full time to that must be wonderful. Do you look back now and at your stage where you are in life, and are you thinking, man, I'm going to go do something else? Or you, like, the ambition is still there for you, like you've still got the drive and the passion and the want and desire to stay where you are now, like you are happy? Because a lot of artists, I guess there's that time in their life, maybe multiple times, they come to that fork in the road where they're like, you know what? I'm hanging up the brush, I'm taking away the camera, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to go get a 9 to 5.
It happens to a lot of people. I think I mentioned before, I don't really have many other skills to professional kind of skills to it almost feels like too late to start another career in some ways. That's obviously in terms of practical reasons. But so there is definitely times when I'm like, man, this is really tough. And I kind of joked about, when you're asked to give advice and you're like, oh no, and if you're not feeling great at the time and just feeling like things are a bit of a struggle, you just want to say like, no, don't do it. Like, I don't know, get out while you still can, because but no, I think if you know that that's what you want to do, or if you've kept coming back to that thing, you kind of know that you've got to keep that in your life and kind of keep making. But it is tough though, because often, well, for me, I've kind of worked in retail and hospitality, and then I also have worked like a receptionist administration for a community art gallery, and then now work to take documentation of exhibitions and kind of gallery assistant work. So it's really nice if you can, in some ways, it's really nice if you can find something that's related to what you already know, because you obviously build up such a knowledge of the art world, and so it can be really nice if you realize, oh, yeah, I do actually have some skills that can be applied, but obviously it's quite a small pool in terms of the depending on what your specialty is. But
I think you're selling yourself well short. You've got a lot of skills, you just don't realize them. You start writing down a list, and you'll see, it's like, wow, I've got all this stuff in here. As artists, do you find that sometimes you just forget how good you bloody are at what you do?
I think you kind of forget all the skills that you actually learn doing everything for yourself, because we're expected to do a lot of the things. So yeah, I guess that can be helpful, like just actually thinking down, or like if you were to write a CV, being like, oh, like I've I've kind of got a website. You do your own, often you're doing your own Instagram, so that's like social media, you take photo, so I think a lot of artists do have many skills there, but I guess in terms of being able to apply those, there isn't a huge pool of gallery jobs, but that's kind of often why I guess in terms of visual artists, they kind of my partner's a art installer, so he like hangs pictures for private clients. So that's using like his skills that he's learned. So it is nice to be able to use the things that you have gained from professionally and from art school. In some ways, though, some people find that they want something completely different, so they don't. So it maybe doesn't use the same emotional energy, or talking to some people, if you work in a desk job or in admin or something, completely removed, then that can also work for some people. If you can have that consistency there, and then you can kind of give all your creative energy to your practice. So it's tricky. I think I would love to be able to be a full-time artist one day, but I think I like I said, I've had tastes of that during residencies, and tastes of that house sitting and stuff like that, but it's never been truly kind of living off my work. But it's almost a hard dream to come to terms with, because it's hard to know how possible it is. I guess that's what I was saying before in terms of when I was at art school. I didn't really know, like, how can you actually be an artist? Like, is it even possible? But I think you've just got to keep going, and then you are an artist. But it can be quite hard.
And that's the truth, right? Like, and that's why it's so amazing to hear from you, is because you come from a place of experience and a place of knowledge, as someone who's got the drive and the want to be an artist, and you're doing it. So it's great to hear what you have to say, because other people will be listening to this and go, oh my gosh, that's me. That's so me. I get it. Yeah, she's speaking the truth. So at the end, we just ask these quick 5 questions. So I've just got some questions here. I'll fire them off, and you just answer them first thing that comes to your head. And we'll see where we go. So first question, what are the different ways do you get in revenue so you can keep yourself sustained?
I do work with, I'm represented by a couple of dealer galleries. So Yana Miller's gallery in Wellington, and then also Jonathan Smart Gallery in Christchurch. So I do sell works through them, but it's not particularly consistent. It kind of just really depends, and it obviously depends when you have a exhibition coming up, and then you might sell a few works, but then that's a chunk of money to
like a roller coaster, right?
Yeah, that you have to spread out. That has to kind of spread out. And then I have been before my fellowship, I was working part-time as a gallery assistant. So just kind of doing generally taking photos of the work and bit of admin, and kind of just sitting in the gallery. But I have worked on reception at Toi Pōneke Art Centre. That was before that. That was for about 5 years. So and then actually I went overseas for a bit and was working in a couple of restaurant bars. So but that's also
living that artist life.
That was actually in Brooklyn, New York, which was kind of crazy. It was about 10 years ago, a lifetime ago. But that was really draining in a different way. Like, hospitality is super draining. So anyway, so and then I also worked in retail at a camera shop for when I actually that was my first job when I just finished high school, and also through uni. So it's just and my partner's worked in an art shop for a long time. Art shops are great because you get a discount on materials. So
Oh, every bit counts, right?
Every bit counts.
What sort of planning do you do, and how to keep on track? Like, are you a digital person, or are you pen and paper, or combination of both?
Combination of both. I do actually have a printed out like wall planner-y thing that I kind of fold up and mark it on, and it's really funny when I like fold it out when I'm like at a meeting or something, and I like people just like crack up because I like that's so funny. But I do quite like, because I'm obviously a visual person, so it's quite like being able to see everything depending on a larger on a kind of a year scale. But I have actually more recently, like just like Google Calendar has been really helpful in terms of just putting in, depending on if you have lots of meetings and appointments and stuff. But I think for larger projects, I quite like seeing them on like a planner, so I kind of know when big things are coming up and how long I have, and yeah, just being able to visualize that in terms of deadlines and time frame. Yeah.
Awesome. And as a creator, do you experience moments of self-doubt or imposter syndrome? And if you do, what are your tips and tricks? How do you deal with it?
Oh gosh, yes, definitely. It was quite funny. I really felt that starting the fellowship down in Ōtepoti, and yeah, it was like, oh, did they choose the right person, or did the panel? Are you sure? Like, I remember, yeah, I was at the exhibition of the previous fellow, Sarawat Song Sataya, and it was just the most beautiful, amazing show. And I was like, oh no, like, how could I continue or like get up to the same standard? Or yeah, it was definitely like a fear in some ways. But you just got to keep going. And I guess look at the things that you have achieved and be like, no, I have. It's really hard to kind of pinpoint, but I think the main thing is if you are still making, that is huge. Because so many people stop being artists, and often, you know, there's not that many that kind of keep going after art school after a while. So I think it's just remembering that if you keep going, even that is a huge achievement. You know, no matter where you're at, like if you're still doing it, that's, yeah. But then that can also, telling yourself that can also be like, you don't, but it's still a good thing. But yeah.
Keep the roller coaster moving, eh?
You just got to keep it moving, because the longer it stops, yeah, keep going. Yeah.
And how have you juggled your pursuit as a creative, wanting to create and do your art, as well as making it financially viable? Is it a constant battle between the two, or are you managing to find sort of to make it work?
I'm not. Yeah, it's still kind of a battle. I think yeah, definitely. Like I had a year last year where I was like, oh my God, I'm rich. But like I wasn't rich. It was just I had a salary like most more people than not do have consistent salaries. So and obviously, and then it was just the very start, and then I realized, you know, it actually it all goes into living costs, and I also get quite ambitious in terms of my projects, and if I get really focused on something, I really want to throw everything at it. And if you don't have the support of a public gallery that's helping to fund that, or if you haven't got a grant, it can be really tempting to just be like, I'll just pay, you know, put everything towards it. But often, yeah, you need to, if you've been paid for a bit of work, that needs to stretch for a long time. So I'm still working that out, and I'm probably not the best person to ask, because I still get kind of down about the fact that it's not possible to kind of live off selling artwork, and that is ultimately kind of a goal there, but it's not. I guess I battle with the fact that is that something I do still, like, is it possible? I guess it comes back to, so it's kind of a bit of a conflict into how much I need to work, and should I find another more permanent job? So it doesn't really necessarily get easier, because often if you do get a consistent jobs, and a lot of jobs don't, you know, they need you to be full time, that's really hard. So I think people kind of find a bit of a sweet spot if they do have a like a permanent part-time job, if you can work 4 days a week or 3 days, and at least that, even just going down to 4 days, because full-time is so hard to do while you're being an artist. But obviously many people have to have that full-time job, but yeah, just, or sometimes I've got a friend that they do slightly longer days for 4 days, and then it means they have like a full day off on the Friday, and it's just basically juggling your own situation. And I still feel like I haven't really got there. But
and based on that, the journey you're taking so far and where you're hoping to go, any advice for creatives who are at the start of that journey, because you've dabbled here, you're doing it, and it's so cool. And I guess it's kind of strange because you usually ask people who are at the end of the journey, like, yeah, I've done everything, yada yada. But from you, who is still in it, which is so cool to hear that perspective. Any advice for someone at the start of the journey who might be at that art school or right at the beginning or when you were just starting out?
Well, I guess keep going. Like I said, yeah, keep going if you really want to. Maybe work out but I think once you've probably got to that point, you do really want to, and it is hard to know whether you really want to, like I kind of said earlier, but I think you kind of know that it's what you want to do. And if that's the case, you just gotta, I guess, kind of just fight off that self-doubt and just keep going. If you feel stuck, just like start trying to just get in the studio, start doing something. And then things will kind of come. But that's almost like a separate thing from actually making it work financially. So, oh gosh, yeah, it's hard. Keep going. I guess, I find it's really helpful having friends and kind of having networks of other artists that can kind of support you as well. I think that's really really helpful to have friends that kind of understand what it's like to be an artist too. That can be helpful. So yeah, community, I guess, as well. Yeah, for sure.
Love it. And for this one here, it's an aha moment that when you realize the grinders pay off, but you're still grinding. But what I want to know is, in that grind, but you're looking back, because you only keep doing it if you feel like this is worth it, right? So is there a moment that you can think of your career so far where even where you are now, you look back and you go, it's been worth it. It's been bloody worth it. Like, I'm enjoying this. What has brought the smile to your dial to make you want to still be in here? What is that aha moment for you that has kept you, where you are now and to keep going?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a satisfaction when you kind of install a big project and you kind of see what you've made and what you've achieved, and if people respond to that. But I think relying on that isn't always going to get you through in some ways. I think actually it's when I'm in the studio in the middle of a project and painting or playing around with objects or photographing, when I'm in that making stage and things are kind of coming together and you're working on a project and you see it kind of forming up. I think that feeling is probably what lets me know that I'm kind of doing the right thing when you're kind of getting it back, and that's kind of, you kind of realize that this is why I'm doing it. There's some kind of deep level of satisfaction or achievement there, I think, when you're actually in it and making, but that can actually be quite hard to get to that point, because often, a lot of times, I just kind of force myself to go into the studio if you're not feeling great, and you do have to push through a lot. So it's not there every time you're in the studio, of course, but I think finding that moment and then going home for the day, and you kind of keep like looking back at a photo that you took of the painting, for example, and you're like, yeah, that's really looking good, and you kind of, but that doesn't last, like we kind of said, but just really, like, when you're in that, really, I kind of know, like, this is kind of why I'm doing it.
Thank you so much, Emily. I really appreciate your honesty and your rawness. It's beautiful to hear, because it's the truth, and I know other people out there listening to this will really appreciate what you're saying and will really vibe with what you've got to say as well. So I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us on The Big Idea. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, fantastic to meet you, and thanks for chatting.